It was an ordinary afternoon in the busy streets of Washington, D.C., with traffic flowing steadily. Melania Trump, the First Lady, was in a black SUV surrounded by her security detail. The world outside seemed to move in a blur as she gazed out the window, her thoughts drifting from one event to the next. Her role as the First Lady was full of responsibilities, and she often felt the pressure of being in the spotlight. But on this day, she was simply trying to get to a meeting without the constant flash of cameras and the weight of expectations. As the SUV moved along the crowded road, a figure appeared out of nowhere. A young girl, no more than 16, ran towards the vehicle, her clothes torn and dirty. Her face was streaked with dirt, and her eyes were wide with panic. She didn't look like she belonged in the city. The girl was clearly homeless, her face showing signs of wear from life on the streets. But what caught Melania's attention wasn't just the girl's appearance. It was the desperate way she was running toward the car. "Stop! Don't drive!" the girl shouted, waving her arms in the air as she sprinted towards the vehicle. Her voice was filled with urgency, and her eyes were wild with fear. The security team quickly reacted. The moment they saw the girl approaching, they stiffened, ready to act. They had been trained for situations like this, when someone rushed toward a vehicle unexpectedly, especially one carrying a person like the First Lady. There was always the possibility of danger, and their job was to ensure Melania's safety at all costs. The SUV came to a halt, the engine still running as the security officers watched the girl closely. The girl, however, didn't look like she was threatening anyone. Instead, she seemed panicked, almost pleading with them. She pressed her face against the window, her hands shaking as she looked directly at Melania. "Please, don't drive off," the girl said, her voice trembling. She was now standing just outside the SUV, her eyes locked onto Melania's. Melania, surprised but calm, motioned for her security detail to hold back. She felt a strange pull to this girl, something in her eyes that made her feel as though she had to listen. She wasn't sure why, but something told her that the girl might know something important. The girl looked as though she was about to say something more, but before she could, the head of Melania's security detail stepped forward. "Ma'am, we can't risk it," he said firmly. "We need to keep moving." Melania raised a hand, signaling him to stop. She had already made up her mind. There was something about this situation that felt important. She lowered the window just slightly, enough for the girl to speak clearly but still keeping the car safe. The girl's face went from frantic to desperate. "It's not safe. Not for you. There's something wrong with the car," she blurted out, looking from the car's tires to the undercarriage. For a moment, Melania froze. Was this just a desperate plea from someone in distress, or was there something more to her warning? The words hung in the air, and Melania felt a chill run down her spine. She didn't know whether to believe the girl, but something in her gut told her that she had to act. Something wasn't right, and this wasn't just a coincidence. "Please, I'm telling you, it's not safe," the girl continued. Her voice cracked with emotion, and Melania could see that she was genuinely scared. Melania glanced at her security team, who were now looking at each other with uncertainty. What should they do? Should they investigate the girl's claim, or should they continue as planned? The tension in the air was thick as Melania's decision loomed. The SUV was parked on the busy street, surrounded by pedestrians going about their daily routines. The hum of the city filled the air, but all Melania could focus on was the girl standing outside the window, her hands pressed against the glass. The girl's pleading expression was impossible to ignore. Melania felt a mix of confusion and concern, but there was something else too. Something in the pit of her stomach telling her to listen, to trust this stranger. Her security detail, though experienced, seemed uncertain. They were trained to handle threats, but this was different. A frightened girl didn't seem like a real danger. Still, their job was to keep Melania safe, and they couldn't take any chances. One of the officers stood just behind her, his hand resting on the radio, ready to call for backup if needed. "Ma'am, "We really need to move," the security officer said again, his tone firm. "It's not safe to stay here for too long." But Melania hesitated. She could see the girl's eyes were wide with fear, almost like she knew something no one else did. Melania had met all sorts of people in her life, but this girl was different. Her distress wasn't just about being homeless. It was as if she was warning them about something far more dangerous. Taking a deep breath, Melania raised her hand, signaling her security to hold off. She leaned forward in the seat and looked the girl in the eye. "What's going on?" Melania asked gently, her voice calm but serious. "Why are you so scared?" The girl's eyes darted nervously around, making sure no one was listening too closely. She seemed to be weighing her options, but after a few moments, she finally spoke. "There's something under your car, something that doesn't belong there." Her voice was low, but Melania could hear the tremor in it. "I don't know what it is, but it's dangerous. You shouldn't drive." Melania's heart skipped a beat. She had a gut feeling that this wasn't just another cry for help. There was something deeper to this warning, something that felt far more urgent than it seemed. The security officer was clearly skeptical, his brow furrowing as he stepped forward to speak. "It's probably nothing, ma'am," he said, his voice laced with doubt. "We've checked the vehicle already. There's no reason to believe anything's wrong." Melania didn't look at the officer. Her attention was fixed entirely on the girl, whose face was a mixture of fear and determination. The girl seemed to know something, and the way she had rushed to stop them told Melania that this wasn't a coincidence. "Please," the girl begged again, "just check the car. I'm telling you, there's something wrong." Melania paused for a moment, her fingers tapping lightly on the window. The air between her and the girl was thick with tension. Despite the officer's reassurances, something felt off. Melania had been in enough situations to know when something wasn't right. She couldn't shake the feeling that this girl wasn't just a random stranger. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Melania made a decision. She turned to her head of security and nodded. "Check the car," she said firmly, her voice steady. "Do it now." The security officer hesitated, surprised by her command, but he quickly nodded and moved toward the vehicle. He motioned for two other officers to join him, and they started inspecting the SUV more carefully. They checked the tires, peered underneath, and examined the undercarriage closely. Melania watched as they worked, but she couldn't shake the feeling of unease growing inside her. The girl's warning had planted a seed of doubt in her mind, and now she couldn't stop thinking about what might be hidden underneath the car. The seconds ticked by slowly, and Melania found herself holding her breath. She had no idea what they would find, but deep down, she knew it was something that would change everything. Melania sat quietly in the back seat of the SUV, her gaze fixed on the security team as they carefully examined the vehicle. The busy street around them continued its usual rhythm, but the noise felt distant to her now. Inside, she could only focus on the girl outside the car and the odd sense of urgency that had taken hold of her. The girl, still standing just a few feet away, was wringing her hands nervously. Her eyes darted between the security team and the vehicle. She was trembling, but it wasn't just from the cold. It was as if she knew that the clock was ticking, that something had to be discovered before it was too late. Melania felt her heart race slightly. The tension in the air was thick, and she found herself wishing she had more answers. The girl's warnings had been so specific, yet so vague at the same time. What was hidden under the car? Why had the girl seemed so certain of the danger? She couldn't help but feel like they were on the edge of something important, something that could change everything. The security officers, normally calm and confident, now moved with a sense of purpose that was different from their usual routine. They crouched down by the tires, checking every inch of the vehicle, their faces serious. One officer waved a flashlight underneath, peering into the shadows. The others were taking notes, talking quietly, trying to piece together what could possibly be hidden in plain sight. Melania watched them work, unsure of how to feel. On one hand, She wanted to believe the girl's warning, to trust that this was something serious. But on the other hand, the officer's reassurances echoed in her mind. They had already done a basic check of the vehicle, hadn't they? Was it possible that they had missed something? The seconds dragged on, and Melania's thoughts raced. She had been in plenty of public situations before, places where danger might lurk, but she had always been surrounded by professionals who kept her safe. But this felt different. There was something about the girl, about her desperation, that made Melania question everything. Finally, one of the officers stood up, his face pale. He motioned for the others to step back as he reached for a small tool to pry something loose from underneath the car. Melania felt a lump form in her throat as the officer's hands worked swiftly, but carefully. It was as though everyone knew the stakes had just been raised, but no one dared to speak the words. The girl outside the SUV, still watching intently, let out a soft gasp as she saw the officer's hand come into view with something small in his grip. It was a small metallic object, covered in dirt and grime. At first, Melania couldn't tell what it was, but the officer held it up to the light, and a chill ran down her spine. It was a strange device, one Melania had never seen before. It looked like a small box with wires, and its surface was slightly scorched. The officer's face was tense as he turned it over in his hands, inspecting it carefully. The object wasn't something anyone would expect to find beneath a car, especially not a car like hers. "Is this what you were talking about?" the officer asked, his voice tight with concern. The girl nodded rapidly, her eyes wide with a mix of relief and fear. "Yes," she whispered. "That's it. I don't know what it is, but it's not good." Melania's stomach sank as she looked at the object, realizing that the girl's warning had been real. The object wasn't a simple piece of debris or trash. It was something much more serious. But what was it? And how had the girl known about it? The officer carefully placed the device in a protective bag, and Melania turned her attention back to the girl. She wasn't sure what to think or what to do next, but one thing was certain. They had just discovered something that could have been dangerous, and it had all started with a beggar girl's warning. The quiet hum of the SUV seemed louder than ever as the officers carefully placed the strange metallic object into a protective bag. Melania watched, her heart still racing. The girl's warning had been real, and now, the gravity of the situation began to sink in. What had started as an odd encounter on the street had turned into something far more serious than she could have imagined. Her thoughts were a blur, and her mind was struggling to keep up with the sudden turn of events. The girl, standing a few feet away, still looked nervous, but there was a sense of relief in her eyes. She had been right. She had stopped them from driving, and now they had discovered something dangerous. But Melania couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this than met the eye. Why had the girl known about the device? How had she been so certain? The officer who had found the device stood up and carefully handed it over to another member of the security team. "We'll need to get this analyzed as soon as possible," he said, his voice steady, but Melania could hear the undercurrent of concern. "I agree," another officer said. "This is no ordinary object. We need to make sure it's not a threat." As the security team continued their work, Melania turned her attention back to the girl. She had been the one to raise the alarm, and she deserved some answers. Melania rolled down the window just a little more and asked softly, "How did you know about it? How did you know something was wrong?" The girl looked down at her feet, as if unsure of how to respond. She seemed to be gathering her thoughts before finally speaking. "I don't know how to explain it," she said, her voice quiet. "It's like I can feel when something's wrong, when something's dangerous. I don't understand it, but I know it when I see it. I've had this feeling for a while now." Melania listened closely. The girl's words were strange, but there was a raw honesty in her voice. It was hard to dismiss the idea that the girl might truly have some kind of strange intuition. She wasn't just a random homeless girl off the street. There was something different about her. "Do you have these feelings often?" Melania asked, her curiosity growing. The girl nodded, her eyes looking far away, as if remembering something. Sometimes it's just a little feeling in my chest. Other times, it's stronger, like a warning. Like I can see things before they happen. But no one believes me. They think I'm crazy. Melania's mind was spinning. Could this girl have some kind of gift? It seemed impossible, but what other explanation was there? And why had she chosen to warn her? The First Lady couldn't help but feel that she had been brought into something much larger than herself. One of the security officers walked over, interrupting her thoughts. "Ma'am, we've contacted the authorities. They're sending over a bomb squad to investigate this device. We'll need to move to a safer location for now." Melania nodded, though her mind was still on the girl. She couldn't shake the thought that there was more to this than just a random act of kindness or a fluke. The girl's warning had been too precise, too urgent. As the SUV started moving again, leaving the scene behind, Melania glanced at the girl one last time. The girl was still standing there, watching the vehicle with a mixture of relief and uncertainty. Melania didn't know what was coming next, but she knew one thing for certain. Her life had just been touched by something she couldn't explain, and she wasn't sure if she would ever understand it fully. But for now, she could only hope that the danger had passed. The drive away from the scene was quieter than Melania had anticipated. The city streets passed by in a blur, the sounds of traffic fading into the background. Her thoughts, however, were far from quiet. The device that had been hidden beneath the SUV still lingered in her mind. It wasn't just any random object. It was something dangerous. Something that, had it not been for the beggar girl's warning, could have caused harm. The security team was in the process of arranging for the device to be analyzed, but Melania couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. There was so much about the situation that didn't make sense. Why had the girl known about the device? What kind of person was she, to have such a strange, almost mystical sense of danger? Melania's head was full of questions, but for now she needed answers. She needed to understand what had just happened and why the girl had been so certain. But there were more immediate concerns too. She had to remain focused, not just on the strange events of the day, but also on her role as First Lady. She couldn't let this event overshadow everything else. Her security team continued to communicate with local authorities, and the car made its way to a nearby safe house. Melania's mind was restless, her heart still racing from the discovery. But as she sat back in the seat, trying to process everything, her thoughts returned to the girl. The girl had been so sure about the device. She had even called out to them from the street, warning them at the exact moment they were about to drive away. How could she have known? There had to be more to this than just luck or coincidence. Melania began to consider the possibility that the girl had a deeper connection to the situation. Something had led her to be there, at the right place, at the right time. The SUV pulled up to the safe house, and Melania was ushered inside by her security detail. She was quickly escorted into a secure room, and the door was locked behind her. The team immediately went to work, making sure the area was clear. Melania sat down in a chair, trying to calm her racing thoughts. Her mind drifted back to the beggar girl. The girl had looked like she had seen things that weren't easily explained. There was a sadness in her eyes, mixed with a strange kind of wisdom, as if she had lived through experiences most people couldn't begin to understand. She had also looked scared. That was the part that stuck with Melania. The girl wasn't just warning them out of kindness or fear for herself. She was terrified of something, of the unknown. That kind of fear wasn't something most people could fake. It was real. It was genuine. As Melania sat in the quiet room, her mind spun in circles. What had the girl meant when she said she saw things before they happened? What kind of warning had the girl given them? And most importantly, how had she known about the device under the car? She closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. The answers would come. She was sure of it. But for now, all she could do was wait and hope that the danger had truly passed. As the minutes ticked by, the sound of her security team speaking into radios could be heard in the background. The silence in the room seemed almost unnatural, like the calm before a storm. Melania knew that, no matter what happened next, her life had changed. Something about today, something about that girl, had altered the course of her world. She just didn't know yet what it all meant. The truth, she realized, was still unraveling. The minutes seemed to stretch endlessly as Melania sat in the secure room, her thoughts racing. The silence felt almost oppressive, as though the world outside had paused while she tried to piece together everything that had happened. The strange device, the girl's cryptic warning, and the sense of something much larger than herself. It was all too much to process at once. Outside, Melania's security team was busy coordinating with local authorities. The device was being analyzed, and experts were working to determine what it was and what kind of danger it might have posed. But in the quiet of the room, Melania couldn't focus on the technical details. Her mind kept returning to the beggar girl, the strange intuition she had shown, and the odd connection that seemed to exist between them. What had led the girl to warn her? How had she known something was wrong with the car? And why had she felt such a strong sense of urgency? There was no way the girl had simply guessed. There had to be more to it. Melania leaned back in the chair, trying to calm her mind. She closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath, but the questions kept swirling in her head. She couldn't shake the feeling that the girl had been trying to tell her something important. Just then, the door to the room opened, and one of the security officers entered, his face serious. "Ma'am," he said, "we've just received word from the authorities. The device you were concerned about, it's been confirmed as a serious threat. It was designed to cause harm." Melania's heart skipped a beat. It was exactly what she had feared. The device hadn't been some random piece of junk. It had been meant to harm. She felt a chill run down her spine as the gravity of the situation hit her once again. Had they truly avoided disaster just in time? "The authorities are still working on the details," the officer continued, "but it looks like it was some sort of trap. Something meant to go off when the car was in motion." Melania stared at the officer in disbelief. "But how did the girl know?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "How did she warn us before it was too late?" The officer looked at her, his expression uncertain. "That's something we're trying to figure out. She must have had some kind of information, or maybe a hunch, but we're not sure how she knew." The answer didn't satisfy Melania. It wasn't just a hunch or luck. There was something deeper, something more mysterious about the girl's warning. It was as though she had known exactly what to say, exactly what to do. Melania couldn't shake the feeling that the girl had a gift, a strange ability to sense things before they happened. The officer stood silent for a moment before continuing. "We've also been told that the girl has a history of warning people about dangers. There have been reports of her helping others in the past, though most of them are dismissed as coincidence." That was it. That small piece of information, a hint at something more, made Melania's heart race with curiosity. Could it be true? Could this girl really have some kind of ability to sense danger before it happened? And if so, why had she chosen to warn her? The questions were piling up, but Melania didn't have all the answers yet. What she did know, however, was that she couldn't just forget about this encounter. The girl's warning had been too real, too specific to ignore. There was more to this than a simple act of kindness or luck. Melania knew she had to find out what was going on, and why this girl seemed to be the key. With a new determination, Melania stood up, her mind focused. She wasn't going to let this mystery slip away. She would find the answers, no matter what it took. The sun was beginning to set, casting an orange glow over the secure building as Melania paced back and forth in the small room. Her mind was still racing, and the strange events of the day wouldn't leave her thoughts. The girl, the device, the warning. It all felt connected, but how? What was the girl trying to tell her? And how had she known about the danger before it had even happened? The officers had done their job well, securing the area and making sure everything was in order, but the questions that hung in the air remained unanswered. Melania felt a need to do more than just wait for the authorities to finish their investigation. She needed to understand why the girl had been so certain. She remembered the way the girl had looked at her, eyes filled with a mix of fear and determination. There was a sadness in her expression, as if she had seen things that no one should have to witness. And yet there was also a kind of quiet strength. The girl wasn't just some random homeless person. She was someone who had experienced something deeper, something that Melania couldn't fully grasp. Melania couldn't shake the feeling that this girl had known more than she let on. She hadn't just stopped them from driving for no reason. The girl had been so insistent, so desperate for them to listen. It was as if she knew that their lives depended on it. The thought lingered in Melania's mind. Had the girl always known that something like this would happen? Did she have some kind of gift, a sense of danger that could warn people before it was too late? Melania had heard stories of people who could predict things, who had strange feelings or visions. But could it really be true? Suddenly, a knock on the door broke her thoughts. It was one of her security officers. "Ma'am, the authorities have requested to speak with you." They finished analyzing the device. Melania nodded and followed the officer to the secure room where the authorities had gathered. She took a deep breath before entering, her mind focused. She was determined to learn everything she could. Inside, the room was filled with law enforcement officers, technical experts, and a few of her own security detail. The device was on the table, surrounded by experts who were carefully studying it. It looked harmless now, stripped of its mysterious power. But Melania knew that this small object had been designed with a very specific purpose in mind: to cause harm. "We've confirmed it," one of the officers said as Melania entered the room. The device was a sophisticated trap. It was meant to activate once the car reached a certain speed, causing a serious explosion. Melania's stomach tightened at the thought of what could have happened if they hadn't stopped. It wasn't just a random act. This had been planned. Someone had meant to hurt her, to harm the people around her. But why? "The strange thing," the officer continued, "is that we couldn't find any clear connection between the device and any known group or individual. It's almost as if it was a one-off, something personal, but we can't be sure." Melania nodded, her thoughts drifting back to the girl. The warning, the urgency, it had all felt personal. But how had the girl known? She was just a young girl, living on the streets. What could she possibly have known about something so dangerous? One of the officers who had been studying the device spoke up. "We also found something unusual. A small recording device inside the device. It seems like someone might have been watching the car before it even started moving." Melania's heart skipped a beat. They had been watched. Someone had been watching her, waiting for the right moment to strike. The thought was chilling. Melania couldn't ignore the fact that the girl had played a key role in preventing the disaster. She had stopped them in time, saving lives. But the mystery deepened. Who had placed the device under the car, and why had the girl been there to warn them? The questions were still unanswered, but one thing was certain. Melania had been saved by a stranger, someone with a strange gift. And now she was determined to find out just who the girl was, and why she had come into her life at that moment. The evening had settled into a quiet calm, but Melania's mind was far from peaceful. The events of the day played over and over in her mind like a vivid movie, each moment more surreal than the last. The girl's warning, the discovery of the dangerous device, and the chilling realization that someone had been watching her. They were all pieces of a puzzle that Melania couldn't quite solve. She sat by the window in the secure room, staring out at the city. The streets were alive with activity, people going about their daily routines, oblivious to the danger that had almost befallen them just hours before. Melania had always known that her position in the public eye came with risks, but today had shown her just how fragile life could be. She had narrowly escaped harm, and yet she couldn't shake the feeling that something far greater was at play. Her thoughts drifted back to the girl, the mysterious figure who had appeared out of nowhere to warn her. Melania still couldn't fully understand it. How had the girl known about the device? Why had she been there, in that exact moment, at the exact right time. There had to be an explanation, something more than just coincidence. The girl wasn't just some random person on the streets. She had been the key to stopping a disaster. Melania thought about the girl's strange ability to sense danger, to feel things before they happened. It was unlike anything Melania had ever heard of. Could the girl really have a gift? Was it possible for someone to know things without any logical explanation? The idea seemed impossible, yet the girl's actions were hard to dismiss. The way she had warned them, the urgency in her voice, it all felt too real to ignore. As Melania reflected on the events, she felt a sense of gratitude toward the girl. In a world where danger could strike at any moment, the girl had saved her life. She had put herself at risk to help someone she didn't even know. Melania realized that despite the questions that remained, she owed the girl everything. The more Melania thought about it, the more she felt the weight of the girl's warning. She had known something was wrong, and she had acted on it, without hesitation. It was a rare kind of bravery, the kind that came from a deep sense of knowing, not just instinct. Melania wondered what kind of life the girl had lived to make her so attuned to the world around her. What had she seen, and what had she learned that made her different from others? But the mystery was far from over. Melania had been saved, yes, but the danger was still out there. The authorities had yet to track down the person who had planted the device, and Melania knew that whoever was behind it wouldn't stop until they succeeded. She had a target on her back, and the threat was far from gone. Despite all the uncertainty, Melania felt a new sense of purpose. She couldn't let this incident fade into the past. She needed to find the girl and learn more about her, about what she knew and how she had known it. The girl was the key, the missing piece in a puzzle that Melania had to solve. But more than that, she realized that the girl had offered her something invaluable. A glimpse into a world of mystery and possibility, a world where there was more to life than what could be seen on the surface. As the night wore on, Melania made a silent promise to herself. She would find the girl, and she would uncover the truth. The answers were out there, and she wouldn't stop until she had them. The events of the day had changed her, and she knew that her life was no longer the same. The world was more complicated than she had ever imagined, and the girl had shown her that sometimes the most unexpected people could hold the key to solving even the most dangerous mysteries. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Melania had been moved to a more secure location, away from the public eye, while authorities continued their investigation into the dangerous device. They had traced the device's origins back to a few possible suspects, but there was still no clear answer. As the days passed, the unease in Melania's chest only grew. The girl, the one who had saved her life, had vanished as quickly as she had appeared. No one had seen her since the day of the warning. Melania couldn't let it go. She needed to find the girl. She couldn't ignore the strange connection they shared, the feeling that this wasn't just a random act of kindness. There was more to this, something Melania couldn't fully understand, but she was determined to uncover it. Her security team had already searched the area around the scene where the girl had stopped her vehicle, but they hadn't found any sign of her. The girl had disappeared without a trace. Melania knew that finding her wouldn't be easy, but she wasn't going to give up. She spent hours going through the footage from nearby cameras, hoping to catch a glimpse of the girl, but it was as though she had vanished into thin air. Melania felt a sense of frustration creeping in. She knew there had to be an answer, but it seemed like the more she searched, the further the truth slipped away. One afternoon, as Melania sat in a quiet room, scrolling through reports, a knock on the door broke her concentration. It was one of her security officers, holding a folder in his hand. "Ma'am," he said, "we found something you might want to see." Melania sat up straight, her heart racing with hope. She took the folder from the officer and opened it. Inside were photographs, taken from security cameras near the location where the girl had warned her. At first, the images seemed like ordinary pictures of the street, but as she looked closer, she saw something that made her freeze. In one of the photos, the girl was walking away from the scene, disappearing into a nearby alley. But it wasn't just her disappearance that caught Melania's eye. It was the man standing at the edge of the frame. The man seemed to be watching the girl, his eyes locked on her as she walked away. Melania felt a chill run down her spine. This man, who was he? And why had he been watching the girl? Melania leaned forward, studying the photo closely. There was something about the man that seemed familiar, but she couldn't place it. His face wasn't one she recognized, but the way he was looking at the girl, it made her uneasy. This man, whoever he was, had been there at the moment the girl had stopped the car. And he had been watching her, following her. "What is this?" Melania asked, her voice steady despite the sudden rush of adrenaline in her veins. The officer replied, "We've run the image through facial recognition, and we believe we found him. His name is Robert Evers. He has ties to several underground groups, though we're still investigating the extent of his involvement." Melania's heart pounded in her chest. This man, was he connected to the person who had planted the device under the car? Was there a larger plot at play? The officer continued, "We're trying to gather more information on Evers, but it seems like he's been involved in some shady activities in the past." Melania's mind raced. She now had a lead. Robert Evers. The connection between him and the girl was still unclear, but it was a start. Melania knew that finding the girl was more important than ever. She had warned them. But why? Was she somehow involved with Evers? Or had she been trying to protect Melania for reasons that went beyond the ordinary? The answers were still elusive, but one thing was certain. Melania was not going to stop searching. She would find the girl, uncover the truth, and finally piece together the puzzle that had changed her life. As the investigation continued, Melania knew the journey ahead would be long, but she was ready. She was determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, no matter what it took. The world had become a much more complicated place in just a few short days, and Melania was prepared to face whatever came next.